thank you for coming. This is a topic that's become near and dear to my heart, especially theme coordinating. Awesome. And I can now blind people in the audience. Fantastic. Well, anyway, we're going to talk about peer review, how to give and receive constructive criticism, how to get in the right mindset, create the right environment so that this kind of thing can happen when you're down on the floor, when you're talking with friends over a sort lug call, instilling some skills to allow for more communication and more critical review of how we all build as builders so we can be better. So we're going to break it down a little bit here. We're going to start with talking about why, getting into why those things are important that I just listed. Then we're going to talk about the two sides of things, how to be a reviewer and then how to be a reviewee. There are skills in both of those. It's not just one person talking at another. It's very much a back and forth. And then we're going to do some practice. We're going to have some examples, and we're going to run through some things and do a little audience participation, let you guys rip apart the stuff that I've got on here. Just be ruthless, okay? But first, let's get back into the importance of peer review. So why is this important? Well, it benefits both the individual and the community. The individual gets direct feedback one-on-one on something that they've built or something that they are concerned about. It could be a work in progress that we're doing it on. It could be a finished mock. It could be even an idea before any bricks have actually been clicked together. We could be looking at studio files. But it also, in providing that feedback, shows the things that are also solved. It tells you what you need to work on, but then also what you don't, what looks stable, what's looking pretty good and can be kind of set aside for the rest of the development phase. It is both specific to a given mock, work in progress, file, idea, whatever, but the concepts there then spread out beyond that. You're talking about new concepts, new ideas, things that then apply to future mocks that you design. If you talk with somebody, if I'm talking with Eric for the best way to do interiors, which, my goodness, some fantastic interiors come from Eric, then that not only applies to the build I'm asking about, but I'm learning skills for the next time I do interiors. And I've now got some experience working with that and talking with him about pitfalls that might exist, things to worry about. And lastly, because I'm not picking on Eric, this is just a conversation between you and I now. If this conversation goes a certain way and something comes up and I'm not necessarily in agreement, I don't necessarily think that's the best way to move forward, you don't have to do any of it. It's just information. There's no forcing it. There's no social contract that says that you have to build your mock the way somebody else said. You are just getting ideas, getting inspiration, getting feedback from people. Then that application in the individual then spreads to the larger community, in that this one-on-one conversation that's happening between Eric and I builds that trust and respect between the two of us. And if that's going on all over the place, we create this network of trust, kind of like what we have in the lugs, that then can spread out and allow us to grow and excel in the hobby. It's the rising tide floats all ships kind of idea, where you suddenly become as good as the best person in Flora in the lug that you're working in because you've had peer review with them and there's been a sharing back and forth there. The same thing for rock work, the same thing for minifig posing, any kind of facet that we're talking about. And that it allows for the knowledge sharing on specific skill sets like that, like rock work, like flora and fauna, like Brandon telling me how to do Technic. Thank you, Brandon. And then finally, from these interactions that we have, it then spreads and has an effect on non-Lego friendships. You're building that kind of trust, and so this is now a person, well, they told me what's good about my mock and how I could improve it. they can probably help watch my cat while I'm out of town. It's that kind of thing, right? Those are directly related. I'm not jumping too far from anything, right? No, but it builds that friendship. It kind of expands things when you start talking about genres. It's the same kind of concept in most of our lug conversations where you make friends outside of the hobby. This is just more of those kinds of conversations. The sad part of this is that it's generally lacking in our current environment, with the exception of the lug. But we have these blogs. I write for one that you may have heard of, TBB. When I'm doing something there, I'm writing about the best. I'm writing about something that is excellent, and I'm talking about the things I like in that build. But I'm not talking about how to make it better. That's not the point. Nobody wants to read that on a blog. That isn't sought out anywhere. And that kind of mentality, whether it's Brothers Brick, whether it's Brick Nerd, whether it's Tips and Bricks, any of these blogs that we have, it's an emphasis on copying the masters and not learning how to do your own thing. You're going, oh, this person was praised for doing this, I should do this. And while that is a way of becoming a better builder, and I don't mean to discount it, it's one of many ways to become a better builder. And it doesn't lead to as much innovation as somebody doing their own thing, going to the community and saying, hey, how can I make this better? Getting good feedback and then taking those steps forward. We do the same thing with conventions. We're giving awards for best trophies. It's difficult for us to do a most improved or a best new builder trophy. That's tough stuff for us to track. As a theme coordinator, I wouldn't dream of being able to appropriately give out those awards. It's difficult. You'd make a mistake somewhere. And it also requires a vulnerability that's difficult, Lego or otherwise. This is something that I've got some references at the end of this. This is all about corporate environment references, about peer review. How a boss can tell an employee how to be better and do it without hurting feelings. This is something that we as a society aren't necessarily the best at doing, and it takes training and it takes effort. So let's get into the specifics here, the ideas of providing that constructive criticism. And rule number one is going to be consent. Now, we as a people are very awkward. And I know that's probably very shocking for all of you, but we're usually a big group of introverts. I mean, RJ aside, we're a big group of introverts. And it's not necessarily the easiest for us to go up and communicate what we're trying to say, what we want from somebody else in an interaction, unless there's been some history established. For new people coming into a lug or coming into a convention like this, that can be very difficult. That's a big leap to take. And so being explicit about that consent, being comfortable with saying, hey, I'd love some constructive criticism about this. I know you probably don't necessarily just focus on the things you like, but if there are things that you think I can improve on, I'd love to hear those too. Being explicit like that will save us a lot of heartache, will save us a lot of trouble. And consent, this isn't the last time this is going to come up, by the way. We're going to talk about it again. Rule number two is basically understand that this person is another person and treat them the way you would want to be treated. So give them criticism, give them a feedback that you would be comfortable hearing about your build, about your mock. Maintain that, make sure you're acting in that empathetic, standing in somebody else's shoes concept, and it's hard to stray. And once again, we're not done talking about the golden rule. That's gonna come up again later. When it gets into the nuts and bolts here, the feedback sandwich is your friend. A great way to structure things. You start with the fine ciabatta roll of positive bottom bun, saying something you like about the build. You slap on a couple of deli slices of some areas where improvement could be made, And you finish it off probably with a little mayo and mustard, and then the top of the ciabatta. And if you're crafting that correctly, it's going to be something that's appetizing to the person you're delivering it to. There's very different forms of this. It doesn't have to always be positive, negative, positive. You can go positive, a couple of negatives, and a positive, positive, negative, positive, negative, positive. Just so long as you are framing things with a positive at the beginning and a positive at the end, that is the main thing to understand in delivering that delicious feedback sandwich. I skipped lunch. I'll see you guys. Be about 15 minutes, and then I'll be back. No. Next step in this, we want to keep things specific and actionable. Don't just say, I don't like it. Brandon. No. Don't just say, this, I don't like this. If you can't necessarily put your finger on why you don't like something, then say that. Gets back to the communication. Say, I don't like the rock work here, but I don't know how you would do it differently. At least you're opening up the conversation then to a brainstorm of how do we do this together? How do we come to a conclusion in this peer review that gives something actionable to come from it, even if you weren't able to create that yourself? Okay? Try not to make assumptions in doing that. A big part of that is going to be related to the next bullet point, making sure to keep budget in mind. Don't go crazy and say, hey, if you had 25 of this custom minifig from BrickCon, that would totally solve your problem here, and they're $15 each, but I'm sure you got it. You can take care of that. That'll finish out the mock. Great. Keep those things in mind. Another piece of that is interest as well, making sure that you're not kind of forcing the builder to stray into something that you care about and you alone care about. Instead, making sure that their intent of the mock is kind of kept in mind. And that may lead to asking a couple of questions while you're doing this, like why did you make these decisions? Why did you include this? Or why are you paying homage to Rick and Morty, but the very specific Revengers episode or whatever? Yeah, it's asking those questions can help keep things within reason. Once again, come to the table with a solution on things. If you can't come to a solution, have the conversation to get to a solution. And if you are truly stumped, but this person is dead set on hearing something that they can improve upon, there is always the do more option. You can always say, this is fantastic, this is great, you've done a fantastic job in a 32 by 32 base plate. Why don't you add another one? Why don't you do X, Y, or Z more to it to add to this excellent thing you've started with? Framing it in the sense that you don't have to. It may be finished. This may be enough as it is, and that's up to them to decide. But you can always suggest why not a little bit extra? How about these extra ideas? Then there is the other side of this, the receiving end of it, and how to accept that criticism. Rules 1 and 2 are very similar. Consent and the golden rule. Making sure that you are explicit about wanting that criticism, knowing yourself well enough to understand what asking for criticism actually means, and this is a tough one. We'll talk a little bit more about that. And then also remembering that this person giving you feedback is trying their best and is trying to treat you like another human being, and that trust needs to exist there and be a two-way street in order for all of this constructive criticism, this peer review to occur properly. As you're doing that, don't be defensive, keep an open mind, maintain that this is somebody else from a different perspective with different ideas. And you don't necessarily have to do everything. I know I'm skipping bullet points like crazy. Your eyes are probably all over the place, but this is the order it's coming out in. Keep an open mind in that sense, and understand that you don't have to do everything. Don't be defensive if you don't like an idea. Make sure that the reviewer feels heard. You don't have to say, I'm going to do that. There's no part of the social contract that says you've got to give them the itemized bullet list of my next steps. But you do have to make sure that they feel like they have appropriately communicated something to you, they have felt heard, and that the review was complete in that sense. Be collaborative and ask follow-up questions. Don't ask defensive questions. Be inquisitive. Don't be, well, how would you expect me to do that? Isn't the best reply. But instead of, what kind of parts are you thinking would make that work? Or, have you seen this technique in another place where I could see some reference images to look at? Overall, remember that the goal of the peer review is not to hear accolades, is not to hear all the good things about your build. It is to hear both the good and the bad, the stuff that needs improvement and the places you don't have to worry about anymore. And that the goal of the whole process is to be a better builder, not to be recognized as a good builder already. All right, we're gonna dig into some examples. I'm hopefully gonna wake you guys up a little bit and put you to work. We're gonna dig into some stuff here, and you guys are gonna do some constructive criticism on me. I know there are quite a few of you in the audience already. This is the reason you showed up, I understand. There's a box of tissues right over there. I'm ready to cry. Don't worry about it. It's just gonna be a good process overall. But we're gonna get into that a little bit and work through some of my earlier stuff. The goal here is not to appropriately identify the things that are wrong. I've got some slides after each one that I use each one as an example, try to show some common issues that can come up when you're building, just because it seems to fit in with peer review to give you guys some ammunition. But that isn't the only thing wrong. There are no right or wrong answers, but there is a right or wrong process, and that's what we're going to try and work on for the rest of this session. Does that sound good? Okay. You got your own mic? Okay, wonderful. We'll flip over to here, and oh yeah, thank you. So I've giving it some thought, talking with Mark and Nicole. I don't know if virtual will be able to participate in this because it requires kind of a voice to communicate it, and the relaying this over a chat message, I think kind of spoils it. That being said, virtual, absolutely ask questions after we're done. I want to make sure you guys are able to participate as much as possible. I apologize that technologically this is a hard needle to thread. So,
if you have feedback following Kevin's suggestions, raise your hand, and I'll go ahead and come to you.
Just fair warning, there's going to be a lot of space here, and there's going to be a lot of bad space here, and I know that. It doesn't have to be a full review. It can just be a single thing, but working on the feedback sandwich.
I want to say I like the trans blue over on the right-hand side. I think it provides a nice landscape touch on there. I'm wondering about the legs on your spaceship. They look a little unstable. Is that something that needs to move, or can it be strengthened? And the rest of the sandwich is, I'm very curious to hear more about the bones in the center. I think that's fascinating. Some kind of archaeological dig on another planet?
Fantastic, wonderful, Lori, thank you. So that's what we're, excellent example. Thank you for kicking it off. That's what we're looking for. I'm not going to reply to it because that's not the point of this. We're not here to pump up my ego by talking about how good these are. This is about actually going through that process. If anyone else wants to take a whack at it, let's get into it.
Thank you. So I really like the way that you've taken many smaller, maybe micro scale features and put them together into a larger scene. I also really think that's clever, the way you have a sand pit or archaeological dig in the middle with loosely placed pieces just, you know, in a random formation, which works. The one thing I would suggest changing is the spaceship that's up on those long, looks like 1x8s or 1x12s. I'd be tempted to stack antennas or maybe some rods to do that so that it looks a little bit more sci-fi and a little less Lego. But of course, that's a choice for you to make. And finally, I just wanted to say that I like the humor here, where there's this big pile of sand, basically, with these bones, and this one poor dude in the corner with a pile of them all pulled out, which adds to the story here. So, thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. I think that was fantastic. I mean, you both are pointing to a common issue here. Those spindly legs, yes, they are a problem. And that's actually what the next slide is going to talk about. This is a terribly staged photo. This does not photograph well at all. It was very unstable. And those legs were a key part of the problem. But even more than that was I was trying to do something here that didn't make sense for Flickr. This would do better, maybe not great, but better in a in-person environment like the convention floor with some work. But this absolutely doesn't frame well. And one of the key things to think about when reviewing somebody's work is, what is the environment they are going to display it in? Is it going to translate well to that environment? Are there suggestions that you can make which contour it appropriately to one or both of them, either digital or in-person environments? We'll do a different one here. Anybody want to take a whack at it? We've had two excellent examples of framing the negative appropriately. Lori asking questions, and you, sir, kind of easing into the structure.
Awesome. So with this model, I really like the active composition. It feels like there's real motion going on. And I think that's something that you're doing well and could build on. A few things that I think could improve it would be more nuanced color blocking. We basically are all our single color palette, being able to separate the flames from the rest of the figure so that the flames really come across as fire would be really effective. Maybe that means a little bit of darker values for part of the dragon and then keeping the wings red or the whole thing a different color, but having the flames really stick out would be nice. But also, the flames are really working. That's a good part usage for flames. So I feel like there's something that's really close to being great, and it's already really good.
Tom, that's fantastic. I love how you layered that sandwich. You were very specific in the pieces of this where you thought the color blocking should change to highlight specific instances. That was fantastic. That's exactly the kind of thing that would help a builder, in this case me, do something with this. Anybody else want to take a crack at it? No?
I also kind of agree with having one uniform color makes it a little bit difficult to see some of those details pop out within the figure. Maybe a suggestion just to add on to this is it appears that he's in some sort of dive and attacking. Maybe you could expand on this and add in something that he is attacking. Is he trying to attack an enemy or something like that? That could really kind of elevate the scene to the next level.
Wonderful. Joe coming in with the do more. Fantastic. I very much appreciated it. And you don't necessarily, you didn't use the sandwich. You don't have to. You framed it in a way that it was still friendly. It built on an existing sandwich. You weren't really trying to hide any maybe hard to hear news by sandwiching it between two positives. It came off great. Again, really good use of the do more option. Let's look at the issue here, and it speaks exactly to what Tom was talking about with color blocking. Build intent is important. And a question here would be, why is it all red? That was the point. Now, why? Is that something that serves a purpose beyond me as an audience wanting that challenge? Is that then something that should be displayed, or is it something that's just kind of a one of for maybe a build challenge or something, Larry? This is understanding that builder intent, understanding the point of it gives you a little bit more information and can help lead the conversation to either helping them resolve the specific intent of the build, or it can lead to a realization of the usefulness of that intent. This is a twofer. We've got this one, and we've got this one. And I can flip back and forth if need be. Very fast. I'm not going to wait. But if anyone has anything they want to say, Crystal.
Thank you. I was going to ask you to go back. So I love the contours, really specifically of the second one, but the coloring seems off. I'm not sure if it's the photography or the lighting, but it's really dark and hard to see some of the best Pete's uses in those dark areas. So I would really like to see that more.
Wonderful, wonderful. So you're, again, not necessarily using the sandwich. Christoph is instead kind of building the compliment into the criticism, which I like. You've done this really well, but I can't see it very well. And so do more to highlight your good work.
Yeah, so I'm going to look at the other one. I really love the build. I love the techniques and as well as the color scheme and all that. This is one where you would benefit from having multiple angles in the photography so that we could see the depth and see it from perspective, because just a single 2D image doesn't really capture the leg placement and the balance that the vehicle itself has. But like I said, it's very clean. It's very well built.
Okay. Thanks, Ben. And I think that's great. Again, you're doing the kind of the compliment plus you've done this well. Now do more to highlight what you've done well.
I'm very fond of this build for many reasons. My only suggestion would be the multiple angles are definitely a plus, but if it was going to be used strictly for a photogenic piece, not necessarily something you would see live, I would probably try to disguise the center clear post behind one of the legs using an angle. That way the mechanics of how it is floating essentially in the middle would be disguised.
Okay, Larry started out with a generic overall compliment. I liked it, great, and then led to well, you've got this one detractor with a solution in order to resolve it, which just required a different angle. No actual need to modify the build. Very good.
First of all, I really like the color choice of blue. It really pops, but maybe if you put a little lighting in it on the trans blue part, it might just bring it out a little bit more. But as far as I'm concerned, I love the whole look of it. Just maybe a little light, like a light kit or something.
Okay, and Eric doing related to I guess what I want to talk about here, which is color blocking. This is the example of my first peer review within the community, where I got very good feedback through Flickr to the point where it is a memorable moment for me on the absolutely atrocious color blocking and the inability to see distinct features of the builds. There's plenty other things wrong with them too, but a great example of maybe not necessarily committing to a given color with a given palette, and instead either waiting for additional parts, probably not possible with the sand red, but maybe having to modify the design in order to have something that looks a little cleaner and has better, more distinct patches of color within it instead of the kind of pockmarked look that we have here. Was there another one for this build? I don't want to move away from it. We can get in as many of these as you guys want for practice.
I really love the tripod legs, just because it's asymmetrical. With the photographing, if you have the ability to go and light it from the front as well as from the back, you'll be able to see more of the dark details. And if you can't do another light, just taking it outside and filming it outside would probably help with that. And then I also love the angle down of the cockpit as well.
Thank you. The focusing on the structural aspects of it, but again, getting back to the photography. I love the idea of the photography outside, finding the solution that is likely the easiest for any builder. Very difficult for them to say, well, I don't have an outside. I can't really do that. All right, I'm going to move on to another one here. This one is a three-parter. Some of you may recognize this. Unless you've seen this in person, who does not know the reference? Could you raise your hands? That's going to be relevant later. Thank you. I'll let you guys go ahead and review, though.
Hello, echo. Sorry. I love the lettering. The lettering really pops out there, and the toast is there. The fingers coming under the toast, as I'm interpreting it as a hand, seem a little blocky to me, and potentially could use a little more detailing around the fingers and fingertips. But the concept and the shape, the layout, all works beautifully. It's well proportioned.
Great sandwich there. Thank you, Brandon. I appreciate the kind of the blockiness, or I guess not even that. I'm sorry. The minor confusion in whether or not it's a hand, as telling that maybe more needs to be done to communicate exactly what this object is, that it's coming off too blocky.
I love how you've done the butter on the toast with those tiles there. I'm wondering, though, who has this blue hand? I mean, is this Grover from Sesame Street, or who is that? So I'm kind of wondering why the hand's blue. But I love the fact that hand, you can tell it's a hand and it's grasping the toast. That's great.
Wonderful. Thank you, Diane. And that's going to get to actually I guess the point and why I was asking people who has this blue hand? What is this? So we had a certain number of people who didn't understand what this was from. If you see it with this build, do you know what it's from? What about if it's with this build? And so, yeah, just like you said, the Butter Battle book. The pitfall of pop culture references is very real. Wanting to build an obscure pop culture reference for the general audience requires you to make it recognizable within the genre. And in order to do something like Butter Battle book, that may be something you really want to express in Lego for the general population's consumption, it may require you to build a path for them to get from something they recognize within the pop culture reference to the thing that you want them to admire. And in this case, it was Cat in the Hat, to Yertle the Turtle, to Butter Battle book. There were others in the display as well, but this was a path that could be built out easily. I'm a big fan of using anchors in order to draw people further into a genre, but that's another talk. All right, we don't have any kind of follow-ups on these. These are just 3 more. We can do a couple more of these, but I want to save about 10 minutes for a Q&A afterwards. So if anyone wants to take a shot at the Bumblebee, or I have a couple more after that if no one's interested in that, or we can just move to questions and answers if you guys are all peer-reviewed out.
I'll give it a shot. I love the flowers. That is a very interesting technique, having them upside down and all the detail with the center. I'm enjoying that a lot. I'm questioning, it still seems a little busy with the ground, the different colors on the ground. And so it's making me wonder, what's the focus of the mock? Is it the bee? Is it the flowers? If there's something that you can do to make it a little more specific, then I think it's a really cute little build.
Lori, what would you recommend that I do to make it less busy?
I would say the texture of the different pieces is good, but making them a more cohesive color palette, like different shades of green or different shades of brown, but that instead of it being the high contrast you have.
Well, with parts that I have available, I can kind of go any way. So what specific shade do you think would look best? Yes, I'm putting you on the spot, but I want to show the reviewer-reviewee conversation once. So.
Yeah, I see what you're talking about. My personal preference is a more natural color, so brown or green. But again, it's your build, and it needs to be what speaks to you.
If I went with olive green, do you think that would look okay?
Anything is possible. You should try it and see what you think.
I'll come to you after I've got the changes. Maybe you can let me know how it looks.
Okay, that should give me time to leave. Thanks.
And there, right there, that is the best answer all day. Thank you, guys. I'll see. We'll move on to the next one. More space. I'm sorry.
So this is a really interesting composition, and there's an incredible detail in all the different levels of the model, with the foreground having detail, the background having detail, and I really like that. There's a couple things that I'm just curious about when I see this model, and maybe it's just me, but the wings read as guitars, and I want to hear from you whether that was on purpose, because if it was, I think there's ways we could refine that shape a little bit more to make it read even more obviously. And if it's not, I think it's worth considering a different composition for the wings so that it's not distracting to people who read it that way. But other than that, like all that detail in the background is awesome. It's hard to say it, but maybe playing with depth of field to soften the focus just a little bit on all those details might help the ships stand out. But it's always a trade-off, so you're gonna have to figure that one out.
I like the way you phrased that, Tom, with the depth of field comment there and acknowledging the difficulty of something like that. That's great. Kind of almost putting you in the same boat as the reviewer or as the reviewee, in that you both have a problem here to solve and that you don't know the answer. And there's almost, it welcomes the question back of, oh, well, what if I tried this? Do you think that would solve the problem? I like that.
That was my first impression too, Tom, was they look like guitars. Hold on, we're getting feedback. My other concern is maybe because of the angle of the photograph, but each ship looks like 3 separate pieces adjacent to each other. I can't see where the side pieces connect to the central focus of each ship. And I think maybe if there was something more identifiable between the 2 outside portions connecting to that centerpiece would help my eye bring it together as a whole ship made out of guitars.
So Larry, actually, Mark, if you could just pop back up. I'm not done with Larry yet.
Get my share here.
So with regard to this, though, you said that the guitar shape is distracting. Totally understood. Totally fine. What else about the build? What do you like? I heard a lot of things to work on. Is there anything about this that is positive for you?
Yeah, I do really like the backdrop. I love that there seems to be some work going on. The windows are a definite bonus in the back. And maybe going back to what I was saying about the side pieces, if the color was changed from white to something that blends a little bit more with the blue, it would look more cohesive. But I really like the positioning. I like that there's some action and movement within the scene. And I like that there's a neutral background color so that the ships actually stand out.
Great, thank you. Thanks for letting me pick on you a little bit. I wanted to make sure there was some meat and there was some bread in there. I think that works. But this was a good example, and we had Tom's comments, and then we moved to Larry's, and there was almost this building that occurred, if you notice, that it was, Tom pointed out some things regarding the shape of the spaceship, and then Larry was right there with, yeah, I agree, and this, but there was, it was starting to build. The negative feedback was starting to go down the hill, and then we just turn into, the reviewee is going to start tuning out with, oh, now they're just ripping into it. And I'm so offended right now, Larry. We'll talk about it later, Larry. All right. No, I just wanted to point that out. Thank you very much, and thank you for letting me pick on you. Okay, last one, and then we'll do some questions.
So first of all, I just really like how you've seemed to spend a good amount of effort to make it pretty studless for the backdrop and most of it. So in turn, when I look at the engine pods, the studs are almost kind of jarring just because it's like they stand out a lot compared to there being almost no studs anywhere else in the build. So if it would be possible to maybe do a redesign of the engines to make them a little less studless, I think that would help if at least if you're trying to go for this really clean studless look, that would definitely help make the whole thing a little more uniform. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic, thank you. And that's, I think these are all valid criticisms. The number of builds here that are still built and that I'm going to take this stuff, hardly any of these are still assembled. So sorry to disappoint. But I think this is great. I think we've gotten in some excellent practice. I hope this was valuable for you guys. This certainly was an experiment for me. And if you have any questions, I'd like to start with the virtual if there's anybody there waiting with anything, just because they've been left out so far. And I'll throw up the references I've used if you guys are curious about those.
Currently, no questions online yet. There's been great feedback, and I recommend after your in-person talk, if you can go in and look at some of those questions, some of those feedbacks, really insightful. But it's interesting, since no one is asking questions yet here, how feedback comes through over, Flickr or, just text messages or Flickr messages. So maybe that.
That's a really good point. Providing that free feedback in a public space when you're getting into the negative aspects of things, that can be a little fraught. You're exposing somebody a little bit, and so the direct message for this kind of thing is really going to be your friend and going to be the best way for you to get that kind of consent that's needed for this two-way street. I would not recommend getting into this in a public forum unless there's a very explicit consent that exists between both parties that likely was worked out outside of that public forum, just to make sure there's no social pressures to accept anything like that. That being said, a passing single comment, that's not the same as a full-on peer review. Any questions in here? Anything from online? Yeah.
Well, like you said, that a lot of these builds aren't built anymore. So how do you respond when somebody starts offering you criticism on how to improve something that you obviously can't improve upon because it's no longer in existence? Is it challenging, or you kind of dismiss the commentary?
So that's a good question, kind of from the personal aspects of this. I'm trying to operate here neutrally for the sake of the experience for you guys. And so my ego was removed from anything that was posted up here. It was not, I'm not invested necessarily in getting ripped to shreds if somebody took this the wrong way and felt like they really wanted to lay into me. But Larry, I'm kidding. I'm sorry. Yeah. There's certainly things I can learn. This session isn't about me learning. These are my builds because that's something I can provide without anybody else's consent. I can easily grant that consent, and we can use them as examples and as fodder for this kind of thing. That's the only reason this is my stuff. And it comes down to my laziness and inability to contact people with good or bad examples. No, this is an easy way to do this and an easy way to provide that kind of feedback. I think we've had
one question online from Kat. The question was, how do you change feedback based upon a competition feedback or just building for building feedback?
I think that gets back to intent. That really is about understanding what the builder is trying to build for when providing that feedback, understanding what the contest is and what the rules of that contest would be. That's kind of the first question right out the gate. Or if it is building for their own sake, understanding what they want to accomplish. Talking with Angus McLean and his presentation, what is the story that builder wanted to convey with their build, and how can you provide feedback that best helps them achieve that?
First thing I want to tell you is this was an incredible presentation. So hats off to you, because this is something that is very important to a community that can really benefit from feedback. So I'm an educator, so I do this type of feedback sandwich all the time with my students, and I have from first grade to fifth graders, and that sandwich mechanism that you were describing is exactly the type of feedback that kids need, because they need something positive, not necessarily, I wouldn't call it negative, but rooms for improvement, and then finish off with that positivity. So I guess my question to you is, do you see a benefit starting your feedback off of that sandwich, or is it more impactful to just kind of dive right in to the actual build? Like, I guess which method would be, in your opinion, the best way to start the conversation?
I think it definitely depends on who you're talking to and what your relationship is with that person. There are definitely people that I build with where just jumping into something, we can be informal enough that the rigors of the feedback sandwich isn't required, and we can kind of just dive into, here's what I like, here's what I don't like, basically turn it into a pros and cons list. The feedback sandwich, I think for newer builders, for people who are just getting into the community and kind of getting their feet wet, maybe those that aren't as experienced in interpreting criticism from others. You said you're a teacher, and so younger kids, I could see have a problem with that and may need the positive intro to lead them into the bad news and then finish with some more positivity. So yeah, I think it very much is an individual basis, but maybe there's some guidelines based on age that exist. I think we're running out of time pretty quick here. Do we have any? Okay, we have 7 more minutes. We can do some more questions. Okay, fantastic. If there's any more, we can get into it. Oh, yeah.
Kevin, I have one question from online.
Yeah.
The question was, and it's probably more directed towards you, and it was, do you ever just want to throw a build just off the table, just completely, maybe because of feedback? I don't know if there's other thoughts, but when do you, and are there examples of where you're just like, I'm going to scrap this build because of what reason?
Oh yeah, the B that was up here was a great example of that. That got scrapped. I built that and didn't like it. Lori was dead on with the composition. I didn't like the granularity and the color breakup, and at the same time, I built it the other way and didn't like it that way either. And I got frustrated with it, and it just went on the scrap pile. And sometimes that happens. Part of the reason why I was building in that 8x8 was I was experimenting with some stuff, and so I wasn't overly investing in the build. I was able to, I lost 64 studs worth of work there. It wasn't a full base, but I didn't knock over my modular and say this is a failure. But those moments happen, and they happen to everybody in the community, and it's important to recognize that both in a reviewer-reviewee relationship.
I was just wondering if you have any suggestions for forums for us to practice these new feedback skills, or for us to get feedback as builders. What are the best places to go?
Lugs are fantastic for this, both the in-person and the virtual. It may require a bit of a lead up into something. It's not necessarily I show up day one and I'm like, hey, review my stuff, please. But you start to form those initial relationships where consent it becomes a viable option, or you're able to have private conversations with one or a couple of people about your build. The virtual option, I think, right now is pretty spectacular. I'm a part of a Sunday meeting that occurs, and anybody on that call at this point, after so many years that we started mid-COVID, I'm comfortable and would trust anybody there to have that conversation. And Larry, I'm going to point you out, but one of the reasons I'm comfortable joking with you is because we talk on that call, and I value your opinion that much. I think we got time for one more question.
So I just wanted to say your feedback sandwich is a great model, and it's so important to leave with that final feedback. And in fact, I'm a teacher too, and at our school we were given the guideline of 5 positives for every 1 negative feedback, because research shows that that anything less than that sort of a toxic relationship actually. So like that trusting, like you were talking about the building community within our lugs, like those. We can't emphasize enough how much it's important to have the positives as well and end with the positives.
Great, thank you. I think that's, we're going to have to call it there, right, Nicole? And okay, I thank you guys for coming. I appreciate it very much, and enjoy the rest of the con.